Yo, what's happening, guys? It's GM Cody back with another video this week, and of course, this week we are continuing our overview of original Dungeons and Dragons, specifically the white box. And last week we looked at, or I'm sorry, not last week. I didn't actually even do a video last week. Week before last, we started this overview of original Dungeons and Dragons in celebration of 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons. And we looked at the first booklet that came in the white box, which is Min and Magic, which is all the rules to create characters and character classes and races and spells and all that stuff. And this week we are looking at booklet 2, which is Monsters and Treasure, which basically this is kind of the monster manual of OD&D white box. And this details all the monsters in the game, up to this point, of course, and treasures, of course, if the name is pretty obvious, right? So that's what we're going to look at tonight. And I don't really have a preamble or anything for this, so it probably won't be too long of a video. And I did say, and I said this the last time I did this, that we might combine Underworld and Wilderness Adventure. But the more I look at it, the more I think it requires special attention. So we will do that in a separate video, and then we will move on to the supplements, starting with Supplement 1, Greyhawk. So let's get right into it, shall we? Monsters and Treasure. Here we go. Dungeons and Dragons. Rules for fantastic medieval war games. Campaigns playable with paper and pencil and miniature figures. By Gygax and Arneson. Monsters and Treasure. Volume 2 of 3 books published by Tactical Studies Rules. And here we go, the first splash page, and obviously whoever owned this got it signed by Gygax. Lucky them. Very cool. And we get this cool art here. And I'm not sure, again, who the artist is, but I assume they were mostly amateur artists that hung around the TSR crew at the time. But this is really, I actually like this piece right here. This is pretty cool. So here we go, Monsters Treasure, getting right into it. There's no introduction or anything. It goes right into monster reference. And this would look very familiar to you if you are familiar with the Monsters Manual from AD&D, right? So basically you've got monster type, number of peering, armor class, move, which is in inches, hit dice, percentage in layer, and type or amount of treasure. So, of course, monster type lists the type of monster. Number of peering is the number of peering of monsters in their layers. So if you look down here, there's an asterisk, and that means referee's option. Increase or decrease according to party concerned. Used primarily for outdoor encounters. So, of course, I don't think most people use these numbers because some of them are quite high. And for an average party, considering, especially nowadays, a lot of these would be really out of proportion. And, they recommend, just like we were talking about, balancing the size of the monsters encountered to whatever the party is. And that would be left up to the DM's discretion. And I don't believe it really gives any advice on that in this book, at least, and I don't think it's in any of the other books either. But, an experienced GM can figure that out on his own. Armor class, of course, is armor class. I believe OD&D armor class starts at 9 and goes to 0, and it stops there. It does not go into negatives. I think it starts at 9. Let's take a look at Min and Magic just to make sure, because I kind of forget, actually. But I'm pretty sure it does. Let's take a look here in the combat section. Yep, armor class goes from 9 to 2. Sorry, not 0. So I'm glad I looked at that. And it doesn't go any lower than that. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit when we start getting into the treasure section and magical armor. That your armor class doesn't actually go any lower than 2. And of course, 2 is the best and 9 is the worst. Movement in inches. This is how much movement they would get in inches. Of course, because they assume you're going to be using, a tape measure, or if you're using a grid, this is how many spaces on a 1-inch grid they would move. Hit dice is how many hit dice they get, and last time we were talking about hit dice, In original D&D, all hit dice is a D6, one die. So you know this is the amount of dice you roll. Hit D6s for hit dice. Percentage and layered. This is the percentage chance if you wanted to roll it. And of course, that would be an option as well if you know these monsters are encountered in their lair or maybe close by. There is an asterisk here next to move in inches. Number after slash is flying speed. Creature may charge also and give bonus to normal speed. And I'm not sure it even tells you what the charge bonus is. You'd probably have to look at chainmail, right? Which is where it refers to you for all the combat stuff for the most part. Type or amount of treasure. Of course, this looks very familiar to you if you've looked at any AD&D books in the past. And this is the treasure you roll for that type of monster. And of course, it recommends that these treasure hoards should be a hoard and only encountered in the monster's lair, not on individuals, except in specific cases where it lists individual treasures. So like right here, goblins and kobolds have a D6 gold piece each. Ogres have 1,000 gold pieces plus whatever treasure in their lair. Giants have 5,000, etc., etc. And you get a pretty decent amount of monsters here. Now, there's a lot of quintessential D&D monsters that are missing from this list, of course. You're not going to find beholders on here. You're not going to find... that's the first one that comes to mind. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but there are a lot of, you know, quintessential monsters that we all know and love. Probably like the owlbear. The owlbear is probably not in here, for example. That are missing from this list, and they will show up later in the supplements, and you know, so we'll look at that. But you do have a pretty good plethora of monsters here. You have men, goblins and kobolds, orcs, ogres, trolls, giants, skeletons and zombies, ghouls, wights, wraiths, mummies, specters, vampires, cockatrices, basilisks, medusae, gorgons, manticores, hydras, chimeras, wyverns, dragons, gargoyles, lycanthropes, purple worms. Purple worms are a very famous D&D monster, and they are mentioned in here. Sea monsters, minotaurs, centaurs, unicorns, nixies, pixies, dryads, gnomes, dwarves, elves, trents, pegasi, hippogriffs, rocks, griffins, invisible stalkers, another very famous D&D monster. Elementals, Jinn, Efreet, ochre jelly, which all these jellies and slimes and molds are very famous to D&D. The ochre jelly, the black pudding, the green slime, the gray ooze, the yellow mold, and different types of horses, mules, small insects or animals, and large insects or animals. And that is all the monsters that are listed here. Special ability, it tells you to reference chainmail for their special ability. It is generally true that any monster or man can see in total darkness as far as dungeons are concerned, except player characters. So that's an interesting little tidbit. Attack and defense, it tells you, referencing you back to chainmail again. And it tells you that you would roll however many times for the monster, and you only add one bonus to one of the dice when you're rolling on the attack charts in chainmail. And we will talk about, how to use chainmail with your OD&D combat if you choose to do so when we actually take a look at chainmail in the future. And actually, chainmail might take a couple of videos because I have a lot to say about chainmail. So, because there's the war game aspect of it, but there's also using it for D&D, and I would like to go in more in depth about talking about it if using it with OD&D and how do you use it. And there's a number of different methods, and we'll get to that when we actually talk about chainmail. And maybe we'll talk about chainmail instead of, instead of jumping into the supplements, and maybe I'll put up a vote. You guys can leave a comment if you'd like. Maybe instead of jumping into the supplements, I'll look at chainmail first. That might be pretty interesting. And then we get into the descriptions of monsters. So you have men, and there's different types of men here, which I always thought was really cool. And this is something I remember from, AD&D. is you had all these different types of men, and it really, as a kid, it really sparked my imagination when I would see all these different types of men, and give me a lot of ideas, and still does actually when I think about it. So you have bandits here, and a lot of these human types are pretty much the same. They might have some small differences. The main difference is going to be the composition of the band of humans you're going to encounter, or monsters, as we'll see later. So, for every 50 bandits, there will be an addition of a 1/5 or 6th level fighter, or 50% chance for a magic user, 25% chance for a cleric, etc., etc. And then you would roll here for different types, and they would have these different types of equipment on them, and possibly magic items too. And for every certain amount you encounter, there's a percentage chance that they would have a certain composition or items. Berserkers are, well, anyways, bandits are basically just regular humans. They don't have any special bonuses or anything. They, have 1 hit die. Berserkers are normal humans, except they get +2 to their die score when rolling due to their ferocity, which I guess is to hit. They also never check morale. Their armor class is as leather armor. It gives you, their alignment, of course, which I didn't mention, and their movement. Brigands, same as bandits, except +1 morale and chaos alignment. Dervishes are fanatically religious nomads who fight as berserkers, never check morale, with +1 on their hit dice, and otherwise as nomads below. Nomads, these raiders of the desert or steppes, are similar to bandits as far as super normal types, and most other characteristics go, and it gives a composition of forces again. Buccaneers are water-going bandits in all respects. Pirates are the same as buccaneers, except they are lined with chaos. Cavemen, which is cool. Cavemen fight as 2nd level fighting men, armed with weapons equal to morning stars. They have no armor, but get 2 hit dice. They have -1 morale. Alignment is always neutrality. It's going to mention this a few times, and it might not get pointed out again because I might skip over some things. Why would you list the specific type of weapon when all weapons do the same damage in OD&D? Well, if you're using the chainmail supplement, different types of weapons matter against certain types of armor. So that could matter if you were using the chainmail combats, man-to-man combat system. So, and again, we'll take a look at that later. Mermen are similar to berserkers in most respects, but they fight -1 on land. They're armed with tridents and darts, 50 darts, I guess, and their armor class is equal to leather armor. Goblins, here we get in, that was all the men, and now we get into some actual monsters. Goblins, these small monsters are described in chainmail. They see well in darkness or dim light, but when they are subjected to fight full daylight, they subtract -1 from their attack and morale dice. They attack dwarves on sight. Their hit dice must always equal at least 1 pip. And it's probably because they get -1 to their hit die, I'm assuming. So let's look here. Goblins get 1 -1, and kobolds get half a hit die. So there you go. Kobolds treat these monsters as if they're goblins, except they will take from 1 to 3 hits. Half a hit die, essentially. Orcs. The number of different tribes of orcs can be as varied as desired. Once decided upon, simply generate a random number whenever orcs are encountered. The number generated telling which tribe they belong to, keeping in mind intertribal hostility. When found in their lair, it will be either a cave complex, 1 to 4, or a village, 5 to 6. The cave complex will be guarded by sentries. A village will be protected by a ditch and palisade defense. 1 light catapult per 50 orcs, and high central tower of some kind. Orcs found in cave will possibly have strong leader protector types as well as those in village, and it gives the type of leaders they would have in their or protectors in their lairs, and they could be a dragon, a magic user, a fighter, ogres, trolls, etc., etc. They will defend their lairs without a morale check. It also says when found outside their lair, you may encounter an orc wagon train, which I found this really interesting. From 1 to 8 wagons. There's a 50% chance of this. Each wagon will be carrying from 200 to 1,200 gold pieces. Of course, you have 10 orcs guarding a wagon, and you roll to see what kind of leaders and what kind of orcs there are. Orcs do not like full daylight, reacting as do goblins. They attack orcs of different tribes on sight unless they are under command of a stronger monster and can score better than 50% on an obedience check. So cool. Hobgoblins, these monsters are large and fearless goblins having a +1 morale. The Hobgoblin King will fight as an ogre, as will his bodyguard of from 2 to 4 in number. All right, gnolls. Gnolls are really interesting in this because they are not the gnolls that we are used to in AD&D and, as we know now. This is actually what gnolls are in OD&D. Gnolls, a cross between gnomes and trolls. Perhaps Lord Sunseed did not really make it all that clear. With +2 morale. I'm guessing Lord Sunsony was a player in probably Gary's Greyhawk game. I'm assuming he might have been one of the Blackmore gang. I really don't remember specifically who they're referring to there. And if you do, please tell me in the comments. So love to know. Anyways, gnolls. Otherwise, they're similar to hobgoblins. Although the Gnoll King and his bodyguard from 1 to 4 will fight as trolls but lack regenerative power. Ogres. These large and fearsome monsters range from 7 to 10 feet in height, and due to their size, they will score 1 die +2 hits of points, +2 points of hits when they hit, so they do +2 damage. When encountered outside their lair, they will carry from 100 to 600 gold pieces. Trolls are, the classic trolls that we all know and love in D&D. They do regenerate at the rate of 3 hit points per turn. And of course, even totally sundered trolls will eventually regenerate again, and they will start fighting again when they have 6 or more hit points. In strength, they're about equal to an ogre, but as they only use their talons and fangs for weapons, only 1 die of damage is scored when they hit an opponent. And it also, of course, acid and fire will do regular damage to a troll, and I think stop them from regenerating. Giants. As stated in Chainmail, giants act as mobile light catapults with a 20-foot range. I'm assuming this means inches instead of feet. They just missed a little mark there, but I'm assuming that's what it means. Due to their huge weapons, all giants score 2 dice of damage, and that's a lot in OD&D. And if I didn't touch on this, and I think I did a little bit when we were looking at Men in Magic, any bonus to damage or to hit in OD&D is a big deal because they're pretty rare. Because all weapons deal a d6 damage, and not all weapons give you +1 damage. So a monster hitting you for 2 dice of damage is a lot bigger deal. So, giants are quite strong. And Wandering Giants will carry from 1 to 6,000 gold pieces with them in their usual copious shoulder sack. Note that there can be many types of giants, including the following. And of course, now we have, here's the listing for all the classic D&D types of giants that we all know and love. Not all of them here, but a lot of them. We've got Hill Giant, Stone Giant, Frost Giant, Fire Giant, and Cloud Giant, as well as their respective hit dice, what type of layer, approximate size in feet, and unusual characteristics. And, some of these, like the Stone Giant throws as a heavy catapult. Frost Giant is impervious to cold and deals 2 dice +1 damage. Fire Giant is impervious to fire, does 2 dice +2 damage. And a Cloud Giant has a keen sense of smell. And of course, that would be up for the referee to determine what that means. And 3 dice of damage. And here it's telling you, a little bit more specifications about, the giants and where they'll be encountered and such. Skeletons and zombies. Nothing too special here, except they do not check for morale. And I did notice when I was looking through this right before I did the video, or earlier this afternoon when I was skimming this over, um, skeletons do not take half damage from sharp weapons in OD&D, and that's something I just realized when I was reading it today. So that's a difference from AD&D for sure. Ghouls, as stated in chainmail for wights, ghouls paralyze any normal figure they touch, excluding elves, of course, and you know this has been a standing thing with D&D for a long time. I don't know if it still is, but it was in many editions that elves were immune to the paralyzation of ghouls. They otherwise melee in the regular fashion are subject to missile fire. Any man type killed by a ghoul becomes one. It also doesn't state that you get a save from paralyzation, but yeah, I think it's assumed, right? Wights. Wights are nasty critters who drain away life energy levels when they score a hit in melee. 1 level per hit. Thus, a hit removes both the hit die and the corresponding energy level to fight, i.e., a 9th level fighter would drop to 8th level. Here we have the classic energy drain, level drain rules from AD&D that would carry on for a long time. Wights cannot be affected by normal missile fire, but silver tip arrows will score normal damage and magic arrows will score double hits upon them. Magical weapons will score full hits upon them, and those with the special bonus add the amount of bonus and hit points to the hit scored. Min types killed by wights become wights. An opponent who is totally drained of life energy by a wight becomes a wight. Energy by, and it repeats itself a little bit here twice. Wraiths. These monsters are simply high-class wights with more mobility, hit dice, and treasure. Hits by silver-tipped arrows will only score half damage, and magic arrows only score 1 die damage when they hit. Mummies. These are the classic mummies from, we know. And they do not score, they do not do energy drain, they do the rotting disease. And of course, a cleric can reduce that with cure disease, and basically reduce it in half, I believe. Only magical weapons can hit mummies, and all hits and bonuses are at 1/2 value against them. Note, however, that mummies are vulnerable to fire, including the ordinary kind, such as a torch. Specters. These monsters have no corporal body, which makes them totally impervious to all normal weaponry. They can only be struck by magical weapons, including silver-tipped arrows. They drain 2 life energy levels when they score a hit. Min types killed by specters become specters, under the control of the one who made them. Vampires are very nasty, of course, as they are in every version of D&D. These monsters are properly the undead class rather than lycanthropes. If they are exposed to direct sunlight, of course, that hurts them. Immersed in running water, impaled through the heart with a wooden stake. Otherwise, they can only be hit as specters, so magical weapons. But such hits do not kill them, but only force them to assume gaseous form if they lose all hit points. Vampires drain 2 life energy levels as specter. They regenerate in combat as a troll immediately upon being hit. At the rate of 3 hit points per turn. Vampires can command help by calling to them from 10 to 100 rats or bats, or from 3 to 18 wolves. They can polymorph themselves into either a huge bat or into gaseous form, doing either at will. They charm min types merely by looking into their arms. Treat as charm person spell with a -2 to the object's saving throw against magic. Vampires cannot abide the smell of garlic, the face of a mirror, or the sight of a cross. They'll fall back from these if strongly presented. They must always return to a coffin whose bottom is covered with soil from their native land during the daylight hours. Min types killed by vampires become vampires under the control of the one who made them. So very nasty creatures, vampires. And I ran a classic Storm Vampire Castle scenario at a convention. It went really well. And actually, I think they killed the vampire by reflecting a lightning bolt or no, I'm sorry. One of the mage tried to cast a lightning bolt, and the vampire. I don't remember. I can't really remember, but they did manage to kill the vampire, and I don't think they might have lost one party member. Cockatrice. The cockatrice is a less powerful but more mobile basilisk. It turns opponents to stone by touch. The cockatrice is able to fly. They are not intelligent. Basilisk, although this creature cannot fly and has the power of turning to stone those whom it touches and those who meet its gaze or glance. It in turn can be petrified by the only reflection of its own eyes if the light is sufficient and it looks at a good reflector. The basilisk is not intelligent. Medusae, a Medusa is the same as you would think. A human torso and head with, the snake of hair of a snake, and is able to turn those to stone just like the basilisk and cockatrice. It is intelligent and will cleverly attempt to beguile opponents in looking at it. 11 also is subject to the effects of its reflected glance. I think this is a typo. I think it means it is also, but there's 11 here. Gorgons. These bull-like monsters have scale of iron covering their hides and at breath, which is capable of turning to stone those who are within its 6. I'm guessing 6 inches again. This says feet. I don't know. I don't really know about that. It might be 6 feet. I don't know. I'm guessing it means inches though. Maybe. In this case, it might be feet. That makes sense. Manticores, huge lion-bodied monstrosities. There are 24. They have spikes, of course, tail full of spikes. 24 spikes, and they can be fired at 6 at a time in any direction with a range of 18 inches accuracy and effect of a crossbow. And it states their favorite prey is man. Hydras, of course, the legendary hydras. So each head of a hydra determines how many hit dice they have, and how many what level of a fighter they attack of. And they can attack with all their heads simultaneously, so they're really nasty as well. Chimeras. A chimera has the forebody of a great cat, the hindquarters of a goat, dragon wings, and 3 heads. The goat's head can gore with its long, sharp horns. The lion's head can tear with its great fangs. And the dragon's head can either bite or breathe fire, but with a range of only 5 inches and but 3 dice damage. Wyverns. These monsters are relative of dragons, but they are smaller and have but 2 legs. A wyvern hasn't the fearsome breath of a true dragon, but they are equipped with a poison sting in their tail and poison enough to use it repeatedly. It is their primary defense, and they will use it 2/3 of the time, biting otherwise. Dice 5 or 6 indicates the latter. The tail is mobile and can be brought over the back to reach any opponent standing before its head. Dragons, here we go, the classic dragons. And they do have in here a lot of the classic dragon types. You have white, black, green, blue, red, and gold. And then it lists what kind of breath weapon they have, the range and shape of their breath weapon, how many hit dice they have depending on their age, of course, and whether the dragon can talk and whether you encounter the dragon sleeping. And then the dragon can only use its breath weapon 3 times per day. And to determine this, I think it's basically a 50% chance on a 2d6 roll. It tells you, the diameter of the weapons, or the breath weapon. And the value of hit dice and breath weapon. So determining their age, how many dice they roll per their hit dice. How many hit points they would have based on how many hit dice they have and how much damage they would deal is based on their age. And here it lists all the different dragons and where they can be found and their special abilities. Some of them, will normally only appear in different places, different types of environments, of course, and some of the dragons can use magic. Most notably the gold dragon. But some of these other dragons can too. Black, green, blue, and red have a possibility as well, just a lower chance. Attacking dragons. Sleeping dragons may be attacked with a free melee round by the attacker and a +2 on hit dice for chances of hitting. Certain types of weapons have more of an effect depending on the type of dragon. And here you have different types of elemental attacks and what the bonus is to hit as well as to damage against that type of dragon. Subduing dragons, they have rules here for subduing dragons, and basically you get a percentage chance based on how much damage you deal, and you roll equal to or less than that, then it means the dragon is subdued. And if you subdue the dragon, it has value for subdued dragons, and lists that subdued dragons can be sold on the open market. And it has this little note here that I found interesting. It says, going out of existence in the game, which I think is a cool little, very subtle little fluff thing that, kind of mentions that dragons are kind of, an endangered species, or should be assumed so. And I think that's really interesting. And it'll tell you, it tells you right here how much, a subdued dragon is worth, which is really cool. It also says you can link to subdual. Oh, right here is the thing I want to read. Of course, the character or characters who subdue the dragon could keep it in their own service or sell to other players for whatever they could get. And it says here, link to subdual. It will maybe try to escape or kill its master, but as long as the master is in a commanding position, will not attempt either course. 2 or more dragons course is a mated pair, and it says that they might have, they'll fight together, of course. Dragon treasure, dragon horde, very young and young dragons probably don't have a horde, but adults will. And that's pretty much dragons. Gargoyles. As depicted in medieval architecture, the gargoyle is a reptilian beast with horns, talons, fangs, bat-like wings, and often bipedal. They are hostile and generally 75% attack with no provocation, unless of the fact that they may be attacking other chaotic creatures. That's kind of interesting. They're at least semi-intelligent and usually can be relied upon to behave with forethought and planning. Only magical weapon attacks affect gargoyles. Lycanthropes, and there's 4 different types of lycanthropes in here. You have werewolf, werebear, weretiger, and wereboar. Only silver or magical attacks affect lycanthropes. And of course, you have their movement here again in inches, the type of hit dice, and their common type of alignment, and their composition based on if they're in a pack or not. And of course, the classic purple worm here, the giant 50-foot worm. As a poisonous sting, it can also, any hit which scores over 20% has a chance of swallowing a creature whole. And in 6 turns, the swallowed creature will be dead. In 12 turns, it will be totally digested and irrecoverable. They don't check morale, and of course will always attack. Sea monsters, it pretty much tells you to treat it like a purple worm, except they should score between 3 or 4 dice in damage. And it also says, as a general rule, these creatures are more for show than anything else. So it should be something maybe that the characters see, but maybe not fight. But if you wanted to fight one, it gives some general rules about fighting them. Minotaurs, of course, where we all know what a minotaur is. Nothing too special about a minotaur, except they don't check morale. They always attack, and they will pursue as long as their prey is in sight. Centaurs. Centaurs are kind of interesting because they will attack twice. Once as a man and once as a horse, a medium horse specifically. And it gives a little bit of, information about their composition, males and females, and what kind of weapons they will be carrying. Unicorns, only a maiden in the strictest sense of the terms. A pure and noble heart may approach the fierce and elusive unicorn. Unicorns may be ridden by maiden warriors and will obey them. Otherwise, they'll avoid human contact unless pressed. This is kind of cool. When attacking, the unicorn fights as a lance on its first charge. and a spear and heavy horse thereafter. In addition, unicorns are very magical. They resist magic as if they were 11th level magic user. They can sense the approach of enemies at 24 inches. They are able to transport both themselves and their riders as if they're using a Dimension Dwarf spell up to full 36 inches once per a day. Nixies, for, tiny little water sprites, water fairies kind of thing. For every 10 Nixies that appear, there will be one charm person spell being cast at any person within 3 inches of their lair. Any charm character will immediately proceed underwater and remain there until the year is up when he is freed. That's pretty cool and very, very appropriate to, the myth and folklore of elves and fairies and stuff. A Dispel magic spell has a 75% chance of succeeding before the charm character is immersed. Nixies are otherwise armed with daggers and javelins, 6-inch throwing range. In water, they will be accompanied by a school of the largest and fiercest fish living therein, probably muskie, pike, or gar. The size of the school being 10 to 100 fish. The fish will attack on command from the Nixies, but flames, such as a flaming sword, will keep the fish back, but not the Nixies. Pixies. It says they are air sprites, as described in Chainmail again. Pixies can be made visible or make themselves, I'm guessing, invisible. Another typo here. But they are naturally invisible to human eyes. Therefore, they are able to attack while remaining generally invisible. They can be seen clearly only when a spell to make them visible is employed. Although certain monsters such as dragons and high-level fighters will be aware of their presence. Dryads, the beautiful tree spirits of mythology. It says they will always stay close to their trees. They're shy and non-violent, but they have a powerful charm person spell with a plus 10% chance of succeeding. And anyone who approaches follows a dryad is likely 90% chance to have the spell thrown at him. Anyone charmed by a dryad will never return from the forest. Dryads have exact knowledge of the woods around them. Gnomes. Gnomes, slightly smaller than dwarves. There's nothing special here. We all know what gnomes are. Dwarves, nothing really special here either. And we already kind of talked about dwarves the last time when we were talking about men and magic. And it's pretty much the same here. They do have rules for, a composition of a number of dwarves. Elves, pretty much the same thing. Trents. In some version, they're in the earlier printings, they're referred to as Ents, giant living trees. They have the ability to command plants. They can command up to 2 trees. They're lawful in nature. They are not prone to involve themselves in affairs which do not directly concern themselves. Very, appropriate to the Ent. Pegasus. Winged horses are wild and shy, being most difficult to capture. They will serve only lawful characters, and once captured, Pegasi are the equal to any horse in battle, for they fight as heavy horses. Hippogriffs. Of course, a cross between a horse and a griffin. The hippogriff is another kind of beast entirely. They are fierce fighters, attacking with both their hooves and their sharp beaks. They're otherwise similar to the Pegasus in nature, although the two creatures do not herd together and will normally fight each other. Rocks, the giant birds. It does say, you can tame a rock here. Kind of gives some information about where they nest and lair and such, and otherwise, they're possibly hostile only to chaos and neutrality, ignoring 80% or being 20% friendly to lawful characters who do not attempt to approach too close. And here we get some cool art here of a Pegasus. Griffins. Of course, we know what a griffin is. How are they, and of course, this is very familiar to anybody that's played AD&D. The griffins really like horses. And they Okay, yeah. So it says, they will react to a horse being brought close to them. In their wild state, griffins will attack anyone nearby with little provocation, particularly if their lair is nearby. Invisible stalkers, of course, these are really, cool. These are the classic invisible stalkers we all know and love. And it says, as previously mentioned in Volume 1, they are created by level 6 spells uttered directly from scrolls. They are faultless trackers. They follow continuously. It does say dispel magic will work on them. Invisible stalkers resent missions with entail long periods of continuing service, such as guarding a magic user for a month, a year, etc. They will seek to fulfill the letter of their duties by perverting the spirit. For example, an invisible stalker is ordered to guard me against all attack and see that I come to no harm. In order to faithfully fulfill this endless duty, the invisible stalker will have to take the magic user to its non-dimensional plane and place him in suspended animation, and assume this is accomplished whenever a 12 is rolled with 2 6-sided dice, checking either daily or weekly as the campaign progresses. Really funny. Elementals, you have the different types of elementals here and how many hit dice they have. You have air elementals, and they score +1 damage when hit. They can turn into a whirlwind, which sweep all creatures under 2 hit dice away. The whirlwind being conical in shape, blah blah blah. Earth elementals score 3 dice of damage, and against any opponent that rests upon the earth, and only 2 dice of damage against all other opponents. They have the effect of a super battering ram against walls, scoring damage if they were striking an opponent with 3 dice of damage. Fire elementals may move up to 12 inches a turn. They score 2 dice damage against... Oh, I skipped here. Hold on. 2 dice damage against all non-fire using opponents, and 1 die -1, or I think that's supposed to be +1 actually, because it says from 2 to 7 here. Against fire using opponents, they act as incendiaries when in contact with inflammable material. They cannot cross water. They are brought forth from flame of considerable heat, i.e. a large fire, lava, etc. Water elementals, of course, can be found in water. Being able to move 6 inches from such a body of liquid. They move at a rate of 18 inches per turn in water, 6 inches outside. In water, they do 2 dice of damage, while outside they do but 1 die of damage. Water elementals can only be brought forth from a considerable body of water, a pond, stream, or large body of water. All elementals must be controlled at all times by the persons who have called them forth. Failure to control any elemental will result in its being turned upon the one who called it forth. Blah, blah, blah. No elemental may be hit by normal men unless magically armed. Jinn. Of course, we all know about the Jinn. And they fight as giants with a -1 as far as damage concerned, thus doing 1 to 11 points of damage when hitting. They can carry up to 6,000 gold pieces weight, walking or flying, the latter for shorter periods. They can create food which is nutritionally sound. They can create drinkable beverage. They can create soft goods, wooden objects of permanence, but metallic items last but a short time when created by them. The harder the metal, the shorter its life. So that Jinn gold lasts but 1 day. They can create illusions which were made until dispelled by touch or magic. They need not concentrate upon the illusions to maintain them. They can form a whirlwind, 1 inch base diameter, 2 inches top diameter, and 3 inches in height, which otherwise is like that of an air elemental. The Jinn are also able to become invisible or assume gaseous form. Yeah, we got a little bit here. I got to take a break in between this, which you guys won't notice. There'll be a little cut. So we'll finish up the monster section here. Freet. These creatures are similar to the Jinn, but their basis is in fire, and they tend to be chaotic. Their fabled home is the city of brass, and this is the first time we get the, the fabled city of brass. They are enemies of the Jinn. The Ifrit are otherwise like Jinn, which damage scored equal to that by a giant 2 dice. And they carry up to 10,000 gold pieces. They can carry up to 10,000 gold pieces in weight. In addition, they can create a wall of fire, and they can become incendiaries. They will serve for 1,001 days. Ochre Jelly. The cleanup crew includes Ochre Jelly and similar weird monsters. The Ochre Jelly is a giant amoeba which can be killed by fire or cold, but hits scored by weaponry or lightning bolts will merely make them into several smaller Ochre Jellies. Ochre Jelly does not affect stone or metal, but it does destroy wood, and it does cause 1 die of damage per turn if it is in contact with exposed flesh. It seeps through small cracks easily. Black or gray pudding. Another member of the cleanup crew. A nuisance monster. Black puddings are not affected by cold. It is spread into smaller ones by chops or lightning bolts, but is killed by fire. Black puddings dissolve wood, corrode metal at a reasonably fast rate, have no effect on stone, and cause 3 dice of damage to exposed flesh. Ouch. If an armored character runs through a black pudding, the monster's corrosive power will eat away the foot and leg protection in the armor so that it will fall away next turn. Black puddings can pass through fairly small openings, and they can travel as easily as on ceilings as on floors. Very nasty. Green slime, a non-mobile hazard. Green slimes can be killed by fire or cold, but is not affected by lightning bolts or striking by weapons. It eats away wood and metal, but not stone. Green slime sticks to flesh and penetrates it in 1 turn, thereafter turning the flesh into green slime. Green slime cannot be scraped away, so when it contacts something, the item must be discarded or excised in some way. A cure disease spell will also serve to kill and remove green slime, even when it is in contact with flesh. Another nasty one. Gray ooze, a seeping horror which closely resembles whetstone and is thus difficult to detect. It will not be spread by non-harmful weapons, but is subject only to lightning bolts or cuts and chops by weaponry, for it is impervious to cold or fire. It does not harm wood or stone, but it corrodes metal at the same rate that black pudding does. It does 2 dice damage to exposed flesh for every turn it is in contact with it. And of course, the yellow mold, a deadly underground fungus which can be exterminated only by fire. It attacks wood and flesh, doing 1 die damage if it contacts exposed skin, but does no harm to metal or stone. However, its worst threat is its spores. Rough contact with yellow mold will have a 50% chance of causing it to break and send forth clouds of asphyxiating spores in a 1-inch by 1-inch cloud. Any creatures within the spore cloud must make saving throws if they have been exposed to poison, and failure to make saving throws results in death for the parties concerned. Hardcore. Horses, the different types of horses here, it refers you to chainmail once again. And also, how much weight horses and mules can carry. Insects are small animals. It gives you some rough rules here for making up your own animals and insects and not listing a whole slew of them. And it also says, there's no limit, and you can make up your own monsters, and it gives some examples here. A titan, a cyclops, a juggernaut, living statues, salamanders. It also mentions the gelatinous cube here, which I forgot about. But I don't think it gives you rules for the gelatinous cube as such, but it does, it is mentioned in here, but it's not in the main listing. It also mentions robots, golems, and androids, which are really awesome. And shows some of kind of the wacko gonzo type of play that was going on, especially at this time. And of course here we have a cool picture of, looks like a werewolf. And then we're going to get into treasure. I got to pause for one moment, so I will be right back, and we will continue this look at monsters and treasure. All right, had to take care of something real quick, and you guys probably didn't notice because that was a quick cut. And we are done with the monsters, and this video is going on almost an hour, but we're going to keep pressing on. Hopefully you guys are still sticking with me here, and we're going to take a look at treasure. Now, this won't be as involved as looking at monsters, and I'm not going to read through it as thoroughly as I did with monsters, because if you played any version of D&D, this is all going to look very familiar to you. So right here we have the classic treasure table, treasure type based on the type of monster corresponding to the letter that we saw at the beginning of the book in the monster matrix, and thousands of copper, silver, gold, gems and jewelry, maps, or magic. And of course this is recommended only for the monsters layer. So there is that. And the percentage, you know, you guys know how this works. You look up the type of monster, you go across the chart and roll percentile dice, and that's how many what, you know, you might, if you roll equal to or under that percentile chance, then you have that much of that type of treasure in the layer. It also says here, you know, about brigands and nomads and such, that they carry they might carry certain treasure on themselves, small amount of gold or whatever, or silver, and they might also have prisoners. Here, magic and maps determination table. So you roll a percentile chance and have a 1 to 75 of getting a magic, and 76 to 100 of getting a map. And then you roll randomly, you see what kind of magic items you can get, or a map potentially. And you know, all these magic items are very familiar to anybody that's played D&D. You have swords, armor, miscellaneous weapons, potions, scrolls, rings, wands, staffs, and miscellaneous magic. And then of course there's a map table over here. You could get a treasure map, magic map, or magic and treasure map, which is really cool and could lead to some really fun adventures actually. And the maps thing, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I don't remember seeing that in AD&D First Edition. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe it's in there. I also don't believe it's in BX either, but I could be wrong again. You know, it's been a minute since I've looked at these tables. So it starts off with the magic sword table, and of course these, you know, you have, you know, swords and their bonuses. Now the bonuses work out a little bit differently in original D&D than they do in other versions of D&D, which I have to remind myself how this works because it's been a while. Swords and damage bonuses. The swords all receive bonuses as far as the probability of hitting an opponent, and they only get a damage bonus against if it lists a specific type of creature. So a sword +1 does not do +1 damage and +1 to hit, or it does +1 to hit, but it doesn't do +1 damage. But a sword +1 but +2 versus lycanthropes will, etc., etc. So that's a little bit different. Also, you know, miscellaneous magical weapons do not give you a bonus to hit, but they give you a bonus to damage, I believe is the way it works. And I'm going to make sure on that, make sure I'm not telling you guys wrong. Yeah, these bonuses are gain a bonus equal to damage scored, except as noted below. And of course certain weapons do, like magical arrows and bows, but for the most part they do not. So that's something that's a bit different in original D&D compared to every other version of D&D. Now this is something that gets commonly house ruled a lot of times, and usually I kind of ignore that rule when I'm running or, you know, original D&D. I just treat, you know, magical weapons the same as you would always treat them. So, you know, a +1 sword would deal +1 damage and to hit. Armor works a little bit differently too, in that I think it subtracts from the attack roll of the attacker and doesn't add to your armor class. And again, let me look here. Yeah, armor bonuses subtract this bonus from the hit dice of the opponents of its wearer. If the shield's bonus is greater than that of the armor, there is 1/3 chance that the blow will be caught by the shield, thus giving the additional subtraction. So that's a little bit different too. So that's how that works. So your armor class doesn't actually go down. Miscellaneous weapons we already talked about. Armor we already talked about, and there's nothing special there. You do have cursed items here, like the cursed sword, of course, and it gives different types of swords here. Potions, all the different types of potions that we're all used to, like levitation and healing and invisibility and invulnerability, gaseous form, clairvoyance, animal control, undead control, etc., etc. Scrolls and the types of spells they will have. Scrolls of protection, curses, curse scrolls, rings, and you've got a lot of classic, magical rings here, like invisibility and 3 wishes and water walking and spell storing, X-ray vision and Jinn summoning and such, regeneration. Wands and staffs, same thing, kind of thing. And miscellaneous magical weapons and or items, and you do have some of the classic miscellaneous magic items that you're used to seeing in future versions of D&D, even though some are missing here. But a lot of the classics are here, like the bag of holdings here, the displacer cloak is here, the elven cloak and boots, boots of speed, the different types of helms, flying carpets here, drums of panic, horn of blasting, gauntlets of ogre power, girdle of giant strength. So there's some classics here, but there's also some classics missing, and I think they will get filled in. A lot of them will get filled in the supplements when we get to those. Different kind of maps and what you would find if you actually found what you're looking for on the maps, which is really cool to me. I like the map thing. Swords, and of course swords have always been a special thing in old school D&D. Swords will have an alignment. They could also have an intelligence and an ego. They could also have special powers, and they can also have the ability to actually speak. And they could have a possibility of having an extraordinary ability as well. And here's all the stuff to determine that. Here we have miscellaneous weapons, and it's telling you all about different things. Of course, the most notable one is probably the magical warhammer, the +3, which can only be used by the dwarf and can be thrown and automatically returns to the bearer's hands. Potions, we looked at those already, or already kind of talked about them. Nothing really crazy to talk about here. It's basically all the stuff you would imagine. Scrolls, same thing. Rings, same thing. Let's see. This is cool, the griffin art here. Trying to look for stuff to talk about here. Magic item saving throws, and here's the saving throws based on the type of magic item. Artifacts. So this is interesting because in the original D&D, there is no listed artifacts in here. It tells you that you should make up your own, but it does give some example artifacts and some example things they would do, like an orb or a scepter, a fighter's crown, a teleportation machine, a stone crystallization projector, and some different things that would happen to opposite alignments for using them, etc. And treasure, the exchange rate for treasure is 1 gold piece equals 10 silver pieces, and 1 silver piece equals 5 copper pieces. Electrum is mentioned and is worth twice or half the value of gold. Platinum is 5 times more valuable than gold, and if it's decided to add it to the precious metals list. And here we have a couple more cool primitive art here. We have the Wraith and the Fire Elemental. gems and their value, jewelry and their value, dragon turtle, and finally we have the splash page. And look at that. We made it in an hour. How about that? So I hope you guys have enjoyed this look at booklet 2, or not Men and Magic, Monsters and Treasure of the original D&D white box. Next week, of course, hopefully next week, we will be looking at the Underworld and Wilderness Adventure booklet 3. And then let me know if you guys want to, after that, if you guys want to look at the supplements or you want to look at Chainmail next. Let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you guys are enjoying these videos, and I will keep it going. And maybe to celebrate 50 years of D&D, we'll just keep going. We'll just keep going through all the editions of D&D and just get it all out of the way. How about that? So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you did. Make sure to give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Tell your friends. Y'all have a good week. Let's see what else is coming up this week. Of course, Wednesday, I'm going to be on the 4-Color Cafe as usual. And there will be no AD&D game on Sunday because I have a date with the wife. So I will not be playing. We will not be playing AD&D 2nd Edition on our regular scheduled night. But hopefully, we can reschedule that maybe for the Sunday after, or we might just have to wait a couple weeks. But whatever. But I will be playing also in Bear, the Gen X GM's Palladium Fantasy game, the monthly fantasy game. If you've not checked that out, you can check it out on my channel. You can check it out on the Society of Tabletop Role Players channel, Bear's other channel, and look at Codex Albana for the first session. It was a very good session. We got a great group of players, a lot of YouTubers, YouTube personalities, and it's been a whole lot of fun. And I am playing the wizard, Lorelin Lothwald. So make sure to tune that in to that Saturday, I believe, and it should be a lot of fun. So until next time, hope you guys have a good night. We'll see you later. Peace.